Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's web seminar. I'm Mike Perkowski with Tech Target. I'm your moderator. I'm glad that you could join us for today's program, an SMB-friendly approach to remote work and collaboration. Before we go any further, I do want to take a moment to thank and acknowledge Citrix for their sponsorship of today's program. We appreciate their support. Obviously, over the past year, so much has changed in our industry, but even beyond that, how our businesses and organizations work. And that's true whether you're a large enterprise or in particular, if you're a small and medium-sized enterprise, SMB. There are a few things that are common across all size organizations that SMBs are really trying to come to grips with in order to improve their employee experience and to simplify the challenges surrounding IT in today's very unusual and rapidly changing environment. One of the issues from a technology standpoint that we would like you to be aware of and understand the many benefits of is that of digital workspace. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that SMBs face and some of the benefits that a well-planned and well-orchestrated digital workspace can do for your organization if you're an SMB. Fortunately, today we have two expert speakers who are going to cover a lot of ground on this topic, and we'll take a couple of questions at the back end as well. We're going to hear from Kevin Beaver. Kevin is an independent information security consultant. He has written, spoken, and presented extensively on the topic of security, as well as for other IT enablement issues, particularly for the SMB audience. We're also going to hear from Matt Crawford. Matt is the Director of Product Marketing at Citrix. So let's move ahead. I'm going to turn the proceedings over to our first presenter, and that's Kevin Beaver. Kevin, the floor is now yours.
All right. Thanks so much, Mike. It's great to be here and welcome everyone. This past year has been a trying time for IT for sure. And trying times call for strong minds and creative thoughts. So regardless of how you view or have been impacted by what's going on in the world, there have been a lot of IT and security-based challenges that people have had to deal with at a moment's notice. And with all that's transpired, we've essentially taken 5, maybe 10 years of IT transformation and crammed it into a single year. And there have been technical challenges, budgetary concerns, and of course, as with most things related to IT, security issues. And if you're responsible for these areas in your small or medium-sized organization, I certainly don't envy you. So we're here today to share some ideas and to talk about solutions that you can put to work for your organization to help take the pain out of the new realities of your remote workforce and working from home. Does that sound like a good goal? Okay, well, let's jump right in. So have you ever stopped to think why exactly you're in business? Generally speaking, the goal of a business is to acquire and retain customers. And in order to do this, the business has to do a whole bunch of things involving areas like legal, finance, operations, and especially IT. This is an important thing to consider, yet many people never really think about why they're in business, much less integrated into their philosophies and day-to-day decision-making. So we are all in business to acquire and keep customers, and we do this so that we can grow the business and earn a profit and create opportunities for ourselves and others. And small and medium-sized businesses are the backbone of the economy, and it's really important, especially during these times, that we focus on doing what's right to keep our businesses on track and moving in a positive direction. So you no doubt have many challenges when it comes to overseeing your IT program. A lot of people don't know what they don't know, and that's okay. It's sort of the nature of the beast. And sometimes it's hard to tell what to focus on, what the actual target should be. When your workforce and the systems that you're responsible for are out of your control in so many ways, it can be difficult to ensure that the systems and software that your users need are available, that things are reasonably locked down, and your business computers and information assets are not at risk. And to my previous point, this is not an enviable position. So you're likely dealing with a lot of things, and many things that I often see with my own SMB clients are budget challenges and considerations, especially if it's a large amount of money up front, having to come up with that money and figuring out how to ideally spread it out over time. There's a challenge of having enough in-house expertise. Do you even have the IT and security skills to do what needs to be done to facilitate this new digital workforce? Policy enforcement is always a challenge. Secure access of these assets can be difficult. There's always the issues related to information sprawl, just files being spread everywhere, not only across your network, but now out into the cloud, and obviously even beyond the cloud on everyone's remote systems where they're working in potentially areas that are not safe. And another big issue that I see, and this is one of the trickiest ones to get your arms around, is shadow IT. Basically, users making IT decisions and sometimes security decisions on your behalf. So you have to be real careful with that. There's this thing we call complexity that's at the heart of most challenges related to remote work. There are complexities involving all sorts of things, but specifically IT, people, and business processes. And what we've experienced over the past year is this traditional, mobile workforce that we're accustomed to, that we've had enough trouble corralling for over a decade. Well, it's been multiplied by a factor of 2 at least, maybe even 5 or 10, and all within such a short period of time. So you now have a broader attack surface. Your users are out of sight and often out of mind, which is not necessarily a good thing, especially for some of them. Your systems are being accessed differently. Your business processes have changed. All of this creates greater demands on IT, and it creates more security risks. And combined, these put business, really the viability and resilience at stake. There's a lot to lose. So how do you get to where you need to be in order to have a business and IT environment that supports this digital workforce, both today and moving forward? Well, it's not just an IT thing, but rather a larger aspect of the business. It's a core function of the business. It's really all about the people who are making decisions. And one of the big challenges that I see as it relates to security and IT and how it all applies to remote working is making sure that the decision makers and the stakeholders are all aiming for the same target and goals. The thing is, you've got to be really careful, because what we typically see is less of everyone aiming for the same goals and more of everyone off doing their own things. There's often division, especially as the business grows, and this creates challenges. Right now, especially when you're having to change the way that you work, the way that you operate, and even think. This is problematic for IT. This is not how you solve the current challenges that you face. You don't minimize complexity with more complexity, things like politics and these cultural divides and so on. So this is going to require good leadership on the part of yourself and others in IT and across the business functions to make sure that the goals are properly evangelized and properly attained. The last thing you need right now is people problems that could otherwise be prevented if business goals are established and well communicated. So I want to shift gears for a minute and talk about what I believe to be the 2 key elements for having an SMB-friendly approach to remote work and collaboration. The 2 things that are required from my perspective, based on what I see in my work, and I've been doing this for quite a while, I've seen a lot of the struggles. I've seen the mistakes that people have made. I've made bad decisions. The 2 things that it always comes back to, it seems, are visibility and control. And what do I mean by visibility and control? Well, in terms of visibility, I mean getting good insight into what's on your network, how things are working, what users are doing, things like that. So you have that information, that insight into what's actually out there and what you're responsible for and what you may need to respond to or make better. And by control, I mean being able to mitigate known security challenges, known risks, known issues, whatever it may be. This control can be seen as, sort of enforcement or sanctions, sometimes in the form of business processes, but usually in the form of technologies and technical controls. So both visibility and control require a specific focus on implementing and fine-tuning the right technologies, your business processes, and really even your people in terms of education and ongoing buy-in. So you can't forget these two elements. These are key. And the way that I see it, it's all a choice. It's as simple as that. Everything you do in IT will either move you towards greater visibility and greater control, or push you away from each of these areas. So moving forward, every decision that you make must take both visibility and control into account. What can you do or not do to improve each area? That's it. What can you do or not do to improve each area? There's always something that you can be doing. And again, based on what I'm seeing out there, doing security assessment work, virtual CISO consulting, there's always more. There's always that opportunity to get better. And sometimes you just need to step back and look at it from a different angle or a bigger picture perspective. So back in 2018, I wrote an article called "What Security Lessons Can Large Enterprises Learn from Small Businesses?" And although this piece was security related, what I talked about can be extracted and applied to the situation you're now dealing with in terms of remote work and collaboration. And the big points that I made in this piece were small and medium-sized businesses are not typically set in their ways. They tend to have a more flexible approach when it comes to solving IT challenges. These businesses tend to be more efficient. It's just the nature of the smaller organization. There's fewer people involved, less decisions that have to be made, and less meetings that have to be held, and so on. It may only take one or two people to solve a problem rather than an entire committee made up of meetings each and every day in a larger organization. And then the final point that I made was when small and medium-sized businesses are faced with these IT and security challenges like we're seeing today, everyone tends to better understand their involvement, and then everyone has a hand in it, actually making things happen. And, the good news is, given the relative simplicity of your business operations compared to other businesses that may be 100 or even 1,000 times bigger, you have the benefit of what I refer to as a more fine-tuned oscillation. And by that, I mean that you're able to minimize the big issues, the spikes in your IT and security program so that everything runs more smoothly. So I race cars in a class called Spec Miata. It's what I do for fun, just to get away from the IT and security madness. When we're out there racing, we don't go all that fast in terms of top speed. We go fast by keeping our momentum up in the turns. And on some tracks, this allows our lap times to be close, if not faster than cars that are way faster than ours, the Porsches and Corvettes and whatnot. But there's more to the story than just that, than just keeping up our momentum. Most of the time that we gain is through making small little adjustments along every part of the track. It could be how we brake, how we get back on the gas, how quickly or slowly we turn the steering wheel when we're going into the turns, how we upshift and downshift. There's so many things that either help us or hinder us. So what we're doing is basically fine-tuning the oscillation between the good and the bad. We're going from positive actions to mistakes. But those oscillations, when we treat this properly, they get smaller and smaller over time. So if you could imagine a sine wave, going along an XY graph, well, that wave gets smaller and smaller so that we're operating or racing as efficiently and effectively as we possibly can. And that's exactly why you in a smaller, medium-sized organization have to continue getting better so that your IT and security programs are continuously improving. And given what you're up against now, in terms of your digital workforce, this is as important as ever. You've got to minimize those spikes. You've got to fine-tune that oscillation. Okay. And there's one thing I want to say about policies. It's hard for me to have any discussion on an IT or security topic without bringing this up. Many of these so-called policies that are involving, acceptable usage, remote access, passwords, software updates, all that stuff, They often create more problems than they solve. If you don't have custom policies that are tailored to your own business needs, if you're not using the proper technical controls to enforce your policies and they merely exist on paper, and if the right people are not on board, you might as well not have any policies. Otherwise, you're doing yourself, your career, your colleagues, your business a disservice. Having paperwork alone is just not worth the risk. Yet that's how I see most policies working in most organizations, especially in SMBs. In the end, your standards and your policies mean very little unless and until you have that technology to back them up, to implement everything as you see fit, as you have to roll it out and must enforce things consistently across the board. So you've got to take that into consideration. Real quick, I want to share with you some traits of my clients that I believe have really the most solid IT and security programs. I started noticing these traits 10 or 15 years ago, and they're very predictable in the businesses that just get it. They're just firing on all cylinders all the time. They're just moving ahead. They're getting things done. They're not experiencing breaches. They're able to roll out new technologies with minimal disruption to their workforce. They just get it. And the things that you see here, they realize what's at stake. They realize that IT is their business. I mean, most new businesses, but even older businesses, whether it's a small or medium-sized organization, they simply cannot operate without IT, without computers and software and all of the processes associated with that. And they get that. Then they understand the risks that they're up against, that they face, whether it be, remote workers off making their own decisions out of your, control of the traditional network perimeter, or threats such as ransomware and other things that are just constantly knocking on the door. These clients have management on board. Usually management, those are the folks that are making the decisions. They're asking the questions. Hey, we know we have X, Y, and Z. We're being asked to do this and that. Certain business deals may depend on it. Management is on board. They're totally tuned into it all the time. They leverage good technologies. I know I keep saying this, but it's really important. You've got to have the right technologies in order to see all of this through and to make IT work for your business. They set users up for success by setting their expectations through well-documented policies and training and that enforcement, so that they have that safety net when their employees might mess up. They outsource when they should. They know that they don't have the necessarily have the internal expertise, or they just don't have time, or it's not good use for their time. So they outsource when they need to. And they practice something that I call relentless incrementalism. They just keep going. They just keep getting better a little bit at a time, over and over and over again. It's just really just like anything else in life. If you want to learn a new subject, if you want to lose weight or become more fit, what do? You don't just buy a magic pill or all of a sudden inject some magic formula to make it all happen. It's a little bit of hard work every single day over time, relentless incrementalism. So keep that in mind. All right, next slide. So it started about a year ago, and it's going to continue through this year and well into the future. This is your time to shine with your remote workforce, with your IT infrastructure, and your overall resilience. This is your time to shine. You have to deal with these current challenges with what I call a beginner's mind. This is something that I learned through my meditation practice. Basically, you're looking at what you're having to deal with here, with a clean slate, from a fresh perspective, no past biases, no outside influences. You're just looking at the current business demands and figuring out what's the best way to address them. I have some questions here. When I have consulting sessions with my clients, we're always talking about this right here. Where do we start? Knowing what we now know, where do we start? And these questions that are here on the slide are super important to answer, both just you within your own mind and at a committee level from the highest levels of the business, from an IT and security perspective. Knowing what you now know, what would you do more of? What would you do less of? And what would you stop doing altogether? And there are very good answers associated with each of these questions. And if you really scrutinize yourself and what you're doing and your intentions and the overall efficacy of your IT program, these questions will really make you think. And the answers are going to impact your IT program for years to come. So ask yourself, what would you do more of, less of? What do you need to stop doing altogether? And, focus on doing what you can to set expectations, enforcing your rules, and then testing and refining that over time. That's pretty much the process. That's the beauty, and I guess you could call it the simplicity of all this, is that it's not that difficult if you look at it from that perspective. So in the end, every decision you make really needs to revolve around, we enable work. And really in this context, we enable remote work. So what can we do to make that better? And as I transition over to Matt, I just wanted to say that if you make good choices, if you look at your IT and security requirements as core business functions, you'll have the tools to create scalable and secure experiences to ensure proper connectivity and availability, and really to enable overall workforce productivity. And that's super important these days. And once you master these things, you'll not only be a hero today, but you'll also be ready to take on the next big IT challenge that is no doubt heading your way. So, Matt, I am eager to hear how you guys at Citrix are handling this. And I know you've got some good information to share with us. So over to you.
Thanks, Kevin. Hi, everyone. Matt Crawford here. And, I agree with everything that Kevin talked about. I've been in the industry about 10 years myself as a director of product marketing at Citrix. And I've never seen such transformation and change as we saw in the last year, right? And, somehow, we made it through 2020 where IT teams had to enable remote work and even accelerate those transformation plans as a matter of necessity. But I think we have to ask ourselves something. Is the status quo really good enough? And, you probably have, if you're on this call now, you have some sort of remote work solution today, right? I mean, you made it through. But I want to pick up on something that Kevin talked about in terms of being proactive. Making it through is not necessarily going to, set you up for success in 2021 and beyond. Moving forward, people are realizing it's not just about, remote work or being in office. It's really the flexibility to do either, to do both. And the risk is if you stick with what got you through 2020, you may not be set up for the future. And so with that in mind, I want to talk about some IT challenges you may find yourself struggling with, and more importantly, that your people may be struggling with and you may not be aware. So if you look at some of the challenges we see, one of which is this lack of consistency, creating a consistent working experience regardless of device type, location, and ultimately that introduces friction for people, right? People just trying to get their work done, but having this inconsistency of a different way to access things in the office versus when they're remote, and having different ways to access things based on what device type they're on, it just adds friction to their day and they're less productive. But some of that friction is there in some ways by necessity. Kevin talked about needing that visibility and control, and you absolutely have to do that. But what ends up happening sometimes is that all those security solutions can lead to a multi-vendor sort of patchwork of solutions. And you have to have that security, you need that visibility, but the risk is you could end up with complexity, not only for yourself as an IT leader or a business leader, but complexity for your end users. Again, not consistent in terms of their working environment. And then even worse is, potentially end users kind of throw their hands up. And then if you don't have the right solutions, you can end up with shadow IT, which is basically unsanctioned technology usage because people just, at the end of the day, they want to get their job done. And so they may introduce things that, just make it easier for them. Ironically, it probably introduces some hoops, but when the users create the hoops, they don't call it the friction. They just call it a workaround in order to get things done. But that opens up security risks in and of itself. And so this leads to a very core concept. We really believe that it's going to take a platform approach to improve that employee experience, simplify IT, and ultimately it's going to cost less too. Another one of the things that Kevin talked about was this, need to just basically save money as the budget concerns. And a lot of times, if you look at what you have today in isolation, some of these security investments, piece by piece, they don't seem very expensive. A couple of dollars per user per month or $5 per user per month here. But the next thing you know, when you add these things up, it's actually pretty burdensome IT costs, especially for a small and medium business. And so when you can take a platform approach that actually combines a lot of these things, you can actually save quite a bit of money as well. So that's definitely something to consider. So the way we look at it is, ask yourself these questions. Are you enabling these 5 things that you see on your screen here? Are you first and foremost, do you have access? Do all of your users have access to all the apps and the files with a single sign-on from any device or location? It's a fundamental principle, right? Do they have a way to get to their stuff and there's only one login that's secure, maybe with multi-factor? It adds that security. Are you enabling the employees to, have some customizable tools that they can actually, simplify their lives with? Or are you providing a way to give them, the streamlined workflows and find the things that they need with some sort of search tool? It's the kind of the way people work today. I don't know about you guys listening on the call here, but a lot of times I like to just search for stuff. I don't want to navigate to stuff, right? You want to input a word, a term, and just find the file that you're looking for example. And then we also have to have high quality connections, right? And this is an issue. It's sometimes it's even in on-premises work in an office, but often remote work for sure. Because of that inconsistency, you don't have that high quality connection. So you need to kind of, account for that with the workspace that you're delivering. And then from an end user standpoint, you want to minimize context switching, minimize these unnecessary distractions that reduce productivity for end users. Now, one of the ways that Citrix has been doing this for years, and a lot of our existing customers do this, and I actually, this is a great foundational approach, is, VDI, desktop as a service. For those who are not so technologically inclined, that's a very popular way to basically accomplish some of these goals by delivering a desktop, a Windows desktop, to any user on any device, with a single sign-on. All of their stuff is there. And really, this is a core of what Citrix has done over the past 30 years. And now it's evolved to where we have things like desktop as a service, where it's cloud managed, and it takes the burden off of IT. And I definitely encourage you, if you haven't already, that we have some great materials and webinars on that if you're less familiar with that technology. And if you're an existing Citrix customer, I think you have a great foundation if you do have a virtual desktop or VDI or whatever you want to term it. And so what we're looking at here is a new way to do things, a different approach. In the past, again, provisioning the apps and the desktops and the files is definitely a big piece of it. But now at Citrix, we're looking at making work better, making it easier for people to do their jobs and not just presenting them with just the apps they need. So for example, you have search with Citrix Workspace, where you can just search and find, as I mentioned, any application, any file that you need. You also have a feed and actions that come with the workspace that present to you as an individual user the tasks that you need to get your job done. Now, of course, you have also those, apps and files and desktops. If you want to launch those and find those, that's what we have had for a long time. But I want to call attention to one particular type of, functionality within this new Citrix Workspace. It's the concept of a micro app. And basically, when we look at getting work done, oftentimes we as workers don't need to use the entire application. Even for great modern applications, after you launch the thing, there's often some navigation and clicking around to do the tasks that you need in that application. It's even more true when you're not in that application every day. And so that's the concept of a micro app. What a micro app does is it actually accesses that application for you and pulls that relevant information so that you can take an action without ever necessarily opening the application. So it could be approving an expense report. It could be launching a service ticket. It could be looking into something like this Tableau to find that sales report that you often go to. And so that's the beauty of this technology, is it can be any of those things, right? It is not just on a piece by piece basis, shortening workflows for app by app. It's actually a platform approach to provide this better user experience. In this case that you're seeing on the screen this is a weekly report. I just sort of say, hit the report and I can launch it and have it show me what those weekly projections are in this case in Tableau. So this is what I'm talking about when I say the future of work, where we're looking at employee experience. So simplifying things for the user is one thing, but from an IT perspective, you also need to simplify things from a security standpoint, right? Having that visibility and control is extremely important. And by the way, it comes along with this workspace experience, right? You have the unified management and control for the complete stack of workspace technology, all within a single console. So that really centralizes the enforcement of security policies. And by the way, it makes it a lot easier for onboarding and offboarding employees. We're definitely seeing an uptick in third-party contract type workers. And if that's you, and if you are hiring those types of people, you need a way to onboard them and offboard them. You don't necessarily want to issue them a device, and yet you don't want them to be, just accessing your network insecurely. And so what Citrix Workspace does is it provides a way to have this secure access to just the applications, just the files that people need, but it does so in a secure way. And actually it's based on a zero trust model, which is basically not only providing one-time access and sort of giving the keys to the candy store, which is similar to sort of like a VPN technology where you're tunneling into a data center. And once you're in, you got everything. It's really offering a app by app approach and monitoring to see if there's any unusual activity, and then taking action based on that, and potentially even removing access, right, or having people contact IT. Those are the types of things that are enabled when you go with this workspace paradigm. I think that's actually all the time we have for today. I think we have the ability though to answer a few questions.
Yes, we do, Matt. So thanks very much to you and Kevin for your presentations. And we do want to take a few minutes just to get to a couple of questions from the audience. Kevin, I'm going to pose the first one to you. And Matt, I'd like to get your take on it after Kevin's perspective as well. So Kevin, the question is, with so many people working from home, what do you think is the greatest security risk that I should be looking out for?
That's a great question, and man, how much time do we have for the Q&A? I think that probably the greatest risk is not acknowledging that you have security risks in a remote workforce. That's probably the biggest one. It's one that's often overlooked because people they depend on their users to do the right thing. Business owners and executives, they assume that all is well in IT land just because they have people, taking care of those issues. But I think ignoring the problem is probably the greatest risk. I would say beyond that, based on the stories that I'm hearing from clients, the incidents that I've been working on in terms of cleaning things up after the going gets tough, so to speak, I would say it's users that are out there sort of beyond your control. They may even be using their own computers on their own internet connections. You have very little control or visibility over what they're doing, and they're making their own decisions. They're making decisions on behalf of IT and security. They're usually violating policies and just doing what they need to do to get their work done and then some. And you can't really blame them. They sort of expect to be able to just do what needs to be done to get their work done when they're working remotely. but it can't be a free-for-all type situation. You've got to put some controls around it. You've got to create some barriers and some hoops to set expectations of your users. And if you don't properly set those expectations and set them up for success, then I think that it just snowballs from there, and I think that could be a bad thing. So yeah, that's where I'm thinking on this.
Yeah, and this is Matt. I'll jump in there. I agree exactly with what you said there, Kevin. I would add that it's kind of this all or nothing approach, I think, is the biggest risk, because people think, okay, I have, at the very least, I have, a good password, I get a good security for these end users. And it's like, okay, here you go. Here's your username. And, I've made sure your password is, however many characters long. And now you can get access to everything. And yes, that sort of reduces your complexity. You've given them a secure login, but that adds all these security issues and the things that you just talked about. And people are not necessarily being malicious about it, right?
Right.
They're just maybe they're a contractor and then they went to some crazy site that downloaded some malware on their computer, and now you've given them access to the to your stuff, and it just crosses over, right? So without that, the security posture that takes that into account, then you can run into trouble. So kind of this all or nothing approach can really lead to trouble.
Yep, that's a great point.
Great. Let's take one more question. Kevin, we'll go back to you again, and like to get Matt's take as well.
Okay.
You mentioned how important it is for everyone to be working toward the same goals, but I'm struggling to get buy-in from my remote work strategies, especially the part of the leaders who ultimately decide on budget. Do you have suggestions for selling these types of projects and also keeping the stakeholders on board?
Yeah, boy, that's the $64 million question there, right? To be able to sell these initiatives to business owners and managers that don't really understand the value of it. And I think that word right there is the very essence of it. You have to demonstrate the value of what you're proposing. And there's a ton of value in terms of, managing your remote workforce and having better controls and visibility into, your information assets, your systems, when people are working from home. You have to put things in their terms. You have to talk on their level. You have to understand the business goals. You may not be privy to some of that because you may not be in the executive leadership meetings and whatnot. But I think generally speaking, you'll know what executives, where they're currently at, what they're thinking, and what their longer term vision is. And there's always a way that you can take, whatever it is that you need to accomplish and put it in their terms and say, hey, we're wanting to accomplish X, Y, and Z in the coming year. Well, one way that I think that we can do that is by implementing this or that technology, or tightening down on certain areas of the network, and or maybe there's just too much information out there floating around that needs to be corralled. Whatever the situation is, understand it, put it in their terms, and put it most importantly in the terms of the business, so that they can see that you are on their side and that you are working to help set them and the business up for success. I think once you do that, I really think things are going to fall into place.
Yeah, and Kevin, I couldn't agree more. And I think, putting the technology in the terms of the business is definitely, I think a great approach. And the flip side of that is also true, right? It's like understanding what those business objectives and then getting to the technology. And so It involves asking questions. It involves, really being dialed into what your company is trying to achieve. I think, long gone are the days, anybody that's in technology, of just focusing on, the bits and the bytes and the technology piece. If you really want to kind of move forward and really help yourself from a career perspective and also help out the business. It's really tying the technology to those business objectives. And it could be things like, oh, well, we're going to need to be, onboarding more contractors. How can we do that faster? Faster onboarding is a huge thing for HR, right? Or for any line of business, honestly. Or, the things like, partnering with other organizations where you need to be able to share content and files, but do it in a way that's secure. And you don't want to just have those files get into the wild. So offering a solution for that instead of sort of restricting and saying, no files go outside the organization, which, by the way, means that they're just going to find a workaround, like I talked about. Those are the types of things that you can do to really, tie all these things together. And when you can accomplish that with a single platform approach where you're not piecemealing 10 different vendors to do it, that's even better for you.
Right. And I think that solutions-oriented approach is key. Go to it from a positive angle, and ask those questions, because you might not know exactly what it is that needs to be implemented. Ask the questions of your leadership. Hey, how do you envision this? What do you think we should do here and here? And let them, that makes them part of your team, and it creates more of a collaborative effect. And as they say, the person asking the questions is the one that's in the control of the conversation. So that's always a good place to be.
So very good. Appreciate the suggestions and advice from both Kevin and Matt. Thank you both. And thanks again to Citrix for their sponsorship of today's program. We appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for this program. We hope that you'll join us for a future web seminar brought to you by TechTarget and its partners. We appreciate the fact that you took some time out of your busy day to learn more about this topic. Thank you and goodbye. We hope you have a great day.